The Bogosity Podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the week of September 22, 2024. The podcast that's ready for its close-up. This is your host, Shane Killian. Next Sunday is the 5th Sunday in the month, so no podcast. We'll be back in 2 weeks, but for now, let's pirate the news of the bogus. So the free speech haters are making their first real move, and as we predicted, they're using AI as the excuse. California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed a law banning political deepfakes in California. It started with a call for action that we've covered, from politicians and pundits including Robert Reich, all the way over to the EU, but we'll cover that in a later segment, over a retweet, re-X, whatever, of a very obvious bit of AI satire about Kamala Harris, which went a little something like this.
I, Kamala Harris, am your Democrat candidate for president because Joe Biden finally exposed his senility at the debate. Thanks, Joe. I was selected because I am the ultimate diversity hire. I'm both a woman and a person of color. So if you criticize anything I say, you're both sexist and racist. I may not know the first thing about running the country, but remember, that's a good thing if you're a deep state puppet. I had 4 years under the tutelage of the ultimate deep state puppet, a wonderful mentor, Joe Biden. Joe taught me rule number 1, carefully hide your total incompetence.
It then goes on to use actual clips from her speeches interspersed with more AI hilarity. The original X post was from Mr. Reagan USA, who explicitly labeled it as a parody. Oh, if the terms of service only allowed me to tell you about the things the Community Notes Brigade tried to attach to it. Fortunately, those of us with sense prevailed. But I guess it just hit too close to home for Democrats who can't take being made fun of to the point where they have to decimate the First Amendment over it. Back in June, Newsom posted on X about this very video. Manipulating a voice in an ad like this one should be illegal. I'll be signing a bill in a matter of weeks to make sure it is. And just a few days ago on the 17th, he posted, I just signed a bill to make this illegal in the state of California. You can no longer knowingly distribute an ad or other election communications that contain materially deceptive content, including deepfakes. And make no mistake, this he was talking about being made illegal is that very Kamala Harris parody. This rushed-in California law takes effect before the election on November 5th and engages in nothing short of histrionics about AI sowing misinformation, with voters all confoozled because now they'll have fake information to deal with, as opposed to totally not at all fake information like the Steele dossier or the claim that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. Newsom also signed a companion bill that would compel platforms to take down that content just because users flagged it. Because when Community Notes fails, bring on the cancel culture. Never mind the fact that it's a blatant violation of Section 230. By the way, of course it won't be used to take down other false claims, like Kamala repeatedly claiming that Project 2025 is Trump's plan long after she was told it isn't. On the same day, Adam Schiff introduced a similar bill in Congress, and Deputy U.S. Attorney General Lisa Monaco said during an AI and Tech Summit, quote, "It is the ultimate double-edged sword. It holds great promise, but also exceptional peril, because it's lowering the barrier to entry for all sorts of malicious actors." You know, like every other piece of technology ever. The California law allows courts to engage in prior restraint, blocking people from distributing deceptive political content during election season. Because they've been itching for this ever since the Citizens United case, where the Supreme Court said they did not get to restrict speech 60 days before an election because that was a massive infringement of the First Amendment at a time when it's most crucial to have it. When asked this question by a reporter, Kamala Harris said,
"Oh, I'm really glad you asked that, but unfortunately, I can't answer that question because I'm dumb as a fence post."
Okay, sorry, that was another AI. I know, there was absolutely no way whatsoever to tell. Come on! As if there were ever a way you could rely 100% on no one posting fake information online. They've said this about CGI, about Photoshop, about all sorts of things. AI is fundamentally no different. Of course, as we covered on more than one occasion, all this will do is put the screws on small companies and open source projects and make sure that AI is only done by their own favored corporations. And of course, they know that perfectly well. But it's another case where the genie is already out of the bottle. The code is out there, the models are out there or easily trainable, and it'll just mean it happens outside of California, or outside of the US if the federal law somehow passes. In response to all the backlash, especially from Elon Musk himself, Gavin Newsom made this public statement, and remember, he specifically referenced the Kamala parody as a need for the law.
I think Mr. Musk has missed the punchline. Parody is still alive and well in California, but deep fakes and manipulation of elections, that hurts democracy and the integrity of the system and trust. And we believe in truth and trust. And we think this law is sound and will be upheld in the courts.
Well, except for the part where it's a blatant violation of the First Amendment. And remember, it's not just parody. The First Amendment covers all speech, especially political speech, and according to New York Times v. Sullivan, yes, that applies even when the speech is false. Government cannot be set up as an arbiter of truth, because that's always the first step to a 1984-style dystopia. If you're looking for a way to support this channel, but you don't have any spare cash and you can't stand ads, you can do so by generating your own cryptocurrency. Use the links at the bottom of the description to follow the link to Odysee.com to listen to the podcast and see all of my YouTube videos as well. Just watching videos will produce cryptocurrency for the creator and yourself. And since Odysee is always monetized and never censored, you'll have no problem seeing all the videos from your favorite creators. You can also use the library credits you created Odysee to tip creators and even purchase paid content. Earn library credits through various rewards, including daily view rewards and the number of shares and invites. And you can interact with creators in all sorts of ways, including like and dislike, comment, boost a post by supporting it, repost it, and share to other sites, all while earning crypto for the creator. Easily monetize yourself and your favorite creators using cryptocurrency, without advertising. Use the link below to visit this channel on Odysee.com and see many of your other favorites there as well. So now let's look at an example that's not free speech. In fact, I used it as an example in the previous segment. Tim Pool is suing Kamala Harris's presidential campaign for claiming that he advocated making Donald Trump a dictator. You might have to draw a flowchart for this one. Kamala, as we said in the last segment, falsely said that Trump's platform is the Project 2025 document from the Heritage Foundation. She also said that this document calls for making Trump a dictator. This is also connected to the fake quote where Trump supposedly said he'd make himself a dictator on day one. I don't think we need to go over that again. At some point, she targeted all of this at Tim Pool, saying that Pool wants to make Trump a dictator and also advocated the execution of his political enemies. According to the filing, quote, in a post to the social media platform X, which has now been viewed more than 12 million times, the Harris campaign stated Mr. Pool is promoting a plan to give Trump total, unchecked legal power so they can jail and execute those who don't support Trump if he wins. The Harris campaign did not hedge this statement or couch it as opinion. To the contrary, to any reasonable reader, the Harris campaign was saying that Mr. Poole wants to suspend the Constitution, make President Trump dictator, and use state power to imprison and kill Mr. Poole and President Trump's political opponents. According to the Harris campaign, then, Mr. Poole's plan is to imitate one of the hallmarks of the most abhorrent, murderous regimes of the past and present. What the Harris campaign published was and is a lie. Mr. Poole has never advocated for the lawless extrajudicial killing of his or anyone else's political opponents, to include in the video clip the Harris campaign incorporated into its X post. Both the clip and its context demonstrate Mr. Poole's commitment to civil liberties, which is consistent with his past criticisms of drone strikes involving American citizens in the war on terrorism. Shocked by the Harris campaign's malicious disregard for the truth, Mr. Poole almost immediately threatened legal action, but the post and the deception it creates remains to this day. In that X post, Kamala HQ said, Trump operatives say their Project 2025 plan is to give Trump total unchecked legal power so they can jail and execute those who don't support Trump if he wins. They have since scrubbed this video from YouTube. The bulk of the clip was Tim Poole speaking, and here's what he said.
Should Democrats be in jail? No question. When Donald Trump gets elected, should he start locking them up? No question. Should there be lists of Democrats that need to go to jail? 100%. And the reason for that is they've committed crimes. We need to make sure that when Donald Trump wins, we've got an attorney general, a deputy attorney general, a head of the CIA and the FBI. Kash Patel would be fantastic. We can have attorney general. There's some names floating around. And then they can start having their investigators and the feds issuing subpoenas, pulling up evidence, and with real evidence, bring them to judges for warrants. Then these people can spend 3 years of their lives fighting tooth and nail for the crime against the government for crimes they committed, and we can prove. Yeah. And the reason why we put them on trial is that we can show the whole world we will uncover what you've done. We will make sure everyone knows, and you will be held accountable for it.
The death penalty comment was made by his guest, Laura Loomer. According to the filing, quote, on August 9, 2019, Mr. Poole told his ex-followers that I oppose the death penalty and I always will. 2 weeks earlier, Mr. Poole announced his support for ending private prisons, ending the death penalty, and ending regime change war. Further emphasizing his opposition to capital punishment, Mr. Poole later explained that he did not make any exceptions to his abolitionist views on the death penalty. I completely oppose the death penalty. I don't think anyone deserves to die, he wrote in May 2020. As for the post itself, the filing states, virtually every aspect of this defamatory post is false. While Mr. Poole supports President Trump's 2024 bid for the White House, the content creator is not a Trump operative, a claim tantamount to Mr. Poole being a paid agent of the Trump campaign. Mr. Poole zealously guards his editorial freedom and independence. Regardless, and upon information and belief, by design, the Harris campaign's assertion that Mr. Poole's coverage of the events of the day is essentially bought and paid for undermines his credibility with his hard-won audience. Nor does Mr. Poole have any Project 2025 plan, as the Harris campaign asserts in the post. Mr. Poole has interviewed people involved in Project 2025, but he is not a contributor to that product, nor does he endorse its contents. Like President Trump himself, and even contributors to different components of the project, Mr. Poole takes exception to any number of items in Mandate for Leadership, including Project 2025's call to enforce the death penalty where appropriate and applicable. He then provided a transcript of the episode demonstrating that Poole made no reference to Project 2025 or executing anyone. In addition to his opposition to the death penalty, while Poole did acknowledge that the death penalty is still a punishment for treason, he says that he didn't think what they had done was treason. He's suing for defamation and bad faith misconduct, alleging that the Harris campaign has cost him millions of dollars for their own benefit. He's requested a jury trial. Defamation is absolutely an exception to the First Amendment, but it could be argued that Poole is a public figure, and therefore he would have to show actual malice, not just false statements resulting in damages. Given his allegations that the Harris campaign keeps the post up long after being corrected, plus other allegations in the filing, he seems poised to argue exactly that. We'll see how it goes.
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
And in a free speech trifecta, let's look at what happened to one of the more notorious censors. Back on the 18th of August, we looked at EU Marketing Commissioner Thierry Breton's attempt to threaten Elon Musk and X with penalties and even shutdown throughout the EU if they didn't censor their website, including things like banning Donald Trump again. Now he's out of there! He's resigned after a lot of reported tensions within the EU, especially with EC President Ursula von der Leyen. In a letter to her that can only be described as a meltdown, he wrote, "You asked France to withdraw my name for personal reasons that in no instance you have discussed directly with me, and offered, as a political trade-off, an allegedly more influential portfolio for France in the future college." It seems like his attack on Musk was just the last straw after 2 years of him doing everything but his job, which was to ensure a level playing field in Europe's digital market. Michael Schellenberger responded, "Good riddance. You were a would-be tyrant and totalitarian. Now you are a disgraced has-been." Don't think the U.S. hasn't had anything to do with this. Hillary Clinton called upon European officials to force Musk to censor American citizens under the Digital Services Act. And Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison praised Brazil for banning X and severely limiting the news sources Brazilians can access. And sadly, there are still others. Getting rid of Breton was just getting rid of the most obnoxious voice. We've covered several other cases of EU censorship that had nothing to do with Breton, and we can expect that to continue. Still, now no one can say it's because Europeans haven't spoken out against it.
Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-aged children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins.
And now it's time to die-archize this week's biggest bogon emitter. And this week it goes to the Teamsters, who have proven once again that unions don't care at all about the opinions of their workers. The last time the Teamsters declined to endorse a presidential candidate was in 1996. Since then, every endorsement has been for a Democrat: Al Gore, John Kerry, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden. Now, for the first time in almost 30 years, they say they're not endorsing a presidential candidate. In 2020, they endorsed Joe Biden with 44% of their members approving him over the 36 who approved Trump. It's a big snub to Democrats, something they've spent the last few days doing damage control for. But this isn't about them. You see, they didn't endorse Kamala, but neither did they endorse Trump, even though a whopping 60% of their members wanted them to. According to their electronic member poll, Harris got a mere 34%, and other candidates a total of 6.4%, compared with Trump's 59.6%. Hey, wait a minute! What's with the 3 significant digits all of a sudden? Did you put that extra digit in to avoid rounding it up to 60? Kinda like how stores price things $9.95 because that looks better than $10. Keep it at 2 significant digits. Trump got 60%. But the higher-ups at the Teamsters, including former President James Hoffa Jr., as well as some of the biggest locals in places like Florida and Michigan, are dyed-in-the-wool Democrats. Current President Sean O'Brien spoke at the Republican National Convention this year, the first labor leader to do so. Trump campaign spokesman Caroline Leavitt said, quote, "While the Teamsters Executive Board is making no formal endorsement, the hard-working members of the Teamsters have been loud and clear. They want President Trump back in the White House. Those hard-working men and women are the backbone of America, and President Trump will strongly stand up for them when he's back in the White House." But among the board members, 14 voted for no endorsement, 3 voted to endorse Harris, and none voted to endorse Trump. Where's the representation of 60% of the membership? And what does it mean that the Teamsters have donated more than $800,000 so far to Democratic PACs, money that comes from the dues of those self-same members? Board member John Palmer made it obvious and undeniable, quote, "We've made a huge mistake. We've lost out on an opportunity to try to get our members to understand why they shouldn't be voting for Trump." So this is not about representing their members. This is about them telling their members what to think. And doesn't that just sum up the big problems with unions as they exist today? Palmer even called the board vote cowardice because they didn't endorse the candidate that barely a third of their members support. But isn't the real cowardice refusing to endorse the candidate a supermajority wants? If you're a member of a union, do you want them representing you and a majority of your fellow members? Or are you really fine with them kowtowing to the interests of an elite minority, diverting your dues to places that are counter to your interests? And are you okay with politicians and the news media continuing to marginalize you over it? So all of that makes the Teamsters this week's biggest bogon emitter. I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.TV anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's firmoo.bogosity.tv. And now let's evaginate this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. What the hell? We haven't done Donald Trump in a while, and the asshat deserves it. And besides, there are only so many times you can attack the left without people accusing you of being a right-wing MAGA hat. So let's dispel that right now and deal with one of the most idiotic of Trump's policies: tariffs. Basically, there's no school of economics that backs up Trump on this. The only real justification there has ever been for tariffs is for revenue generation from a small level of tariffs and excises leveled equally over all products in the economy. Protectionism is an entirely different thing. This is where you jack up tariffs to try and cut imports or put tariffs on certain products to prop up domestic industry. It's exactly the sort of thing our founders fought a war to overthrow, and protective tariffs almost started a civil war in the 1840s, 20 years early. There's a reason why they were called the tariffs of abomination. They haven't made any sense since David Ricardo published his Law of Comparative Advantage in 1817, ironically 1 year after America's first protective tariff. The law says that when two countries have comparative advantages in different products, both countries are better off if they trade. Extend that out economy-wide and worldwide, and it means everyone is better off with free trade. And even if the other country puts tariffs and other restrictions on goods you export, you're still better off having no trade restrictions. That other country is only hurting themselves. Besides, you don't level the playing field by making your site even less level. As counterintuitive as it is, and as much as politicians don't like it, it remains one of the most powerful insights in every school of economics. But the myth has gradually been gaining traction once again that protective tariffs were what made this country great. A myth that isn't just wrong, it's downright dangerous. America's immense growth in the 19th century happened despite protective tariffs, not because of them. In fact, most of the growth was in services and agriculture, which weren't protected by tariffs. Ironically, one big reason for America's growth was the significant amounts of net foreign investment, which politicos and economic pseudoscientists call the trade deficit, in an attempt to make it sound like a bad thing. In reality, that inflow of capital resulted in an outburst of new technology and inventions thriving in a free market. On the other hand, tariffs led to corruption and rent-seeking that had no real value to society. When that came to a head, government got rid of the distortive tariffs and responded with an even more distortive income tax. But that's a story for another day. Another issue that Trump and his flock don't want to look at is how the biggest import at the time that also gave America one of its biggest advantages was immigrants. Despite the fact that people said at the time about German and Irish immigrants what the right says today about Mexican and Haitian immigrants, it turns out that those immigrants, like the much maligned Asians and Italians after them, helped make America the economic superpower it is today. If Trump really wanted to make America great again, he'd get behind open immigration and low tariffs. When confronted with this reality and asked why he would cling to these long-debunked myths, Trump told the interviewer,
"Oh, I can tell you the reason why. It's that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I just listen to people and do what they tell me. I don't think for myself. Why do you think I had bad people in my first term, like Bill Barr and John Bolton? Because all I do is whatever they tell me. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just faking it up here."
Hey, if I give the AI treatment to Kamala, it's only fair that I give it to Trump, too. In fairness, Biden pushed the same kind of tariffs from day one, cutting off oil pipelines, putting tariffs on Chinese EVs, and many other things that Trump is openly calling for, in particular in industries where Biden could protect his unions. Biden was just savvy enough to keep his corruption hidden. Well, mostly. Of course, the biggest lie is that we don't pay these tariffs. We do. Of course we do. And tariffs don't push American industry forward. Only those industries where we don't have a comparative advantage, which, as we've known for over 2 centuries, just makes us worse off. And being over 200 years out of date, both politically and economically, is what makes Donald Trump this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this 4 Things and a Lizard edition of the Bogosity Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support, and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord or at Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Remember, no podcast next week. Will return on October 6th. Until then, here's a quote from Henry George. Protective tariffs are as much applications of force as are blockading squadrons, and their object is the same, to prevent trade. The difference between the two is that blockading squadrons are a means whereby nations seek to prevent their enemies from trading. Protective tariffs are a means whereby nations attempt to prevent their own people from trading. What protection teaches us is to do to ourselves in time of peace what enemies seek to do to us in time of war. The Bogosity Podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.